This is my favorite sermon of the year, partly because I get to do it. It has been said that there are 3 UU sacraments. They are coffee, doubt, and running off at the mouth. Arguing with a UU is a little like mud wrestling a pig. Pretty soon you realize the pig is enjoying it. Arguing is a preferred sport. While I won't deny that some of us enjoy arguing as much for the sake of arguing as much as anything else, by far more relevant is the fact that UUs argue when they consider an idea, thought, or principle important. And when it comes to speaking for a group of us, we get very serious. After all, our religious freedom is what has attracted most of us to our faith. We don't want others telling us what to believe. We don't want to be in a position where we are dictating others' beliefs either. Principles, ideas, values. Shared statements regarding anything, and we get very serious and we talk for a very long time. We'd rather not act than exclude anyone in our acting. Wonderful, noble, valuable standards. Now, hopefully, most of you already know that the roots of Unitarian Universalism go back thousands of years, literally back to the 500s and the Council of Nicaea. And did you know that at the Council of Nicaea we had a heretic there representing us before we were an us? And St. Nicholas punched him for being a heretic. I'm serious. It's written. Therefore, it must be true.
Oh, yes.
If it's not on Facebook, okay, it's not Facebook true. Now fast forward to the United States, 400 years ago, where Unitarian and Universalism were beginning to flourish on these shores. From time to time, in the course of religious history, we feel compelled to pause and make some statement of who we are and what we stand for, because those unwilling to stand for anything will fall for everything, or at least be accused of doing so. The Unitarians moved slowly, but in 1887 they created a document entitled "The Things Most Commonly Believed Among Us Today." And from the title alone, you can hear the reluctance in which they wish to commit to any particular individual and for future generations. Now we must fast forward again. We enter our own lifetimes for many of us, although not all of us. In 1960, the Unitarians and the Universalist traditions were in discussion over merging. A part of the effort and the discussion included preparing a shared statement of purpose, one that could be approved by both groups. And if you ask 2 Unitarian Universalists anything, you will come up with 3 answers. The 2 groups worked separately but concurrently and divisively over exact language, and that nearly derailed the merger. They took each and every word seriously and considered that our 2 movements nearly did not come together over such details as using the phrase "our heritage" rather than "the heritage." It was not small. We are wordsmiths, and we do not take such statements casually. Finally, a compromised version was hammered out in an all-day, all-night parliamentary session of negotiation and debate, and the first statement of purpose of the newly formed Unitarian Universalist Association read that we could come to an agreement. It's on our order of service. Well, not as it was then, but there are reasons. Our contemporary principles began. We care about the dignity of man. We were founded on the ideals of brotherhood, and we encouraged cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. That is not what we say today. All this hundreds of years after we had ordained our first female minister, and with such notables as Susan B. Anthony in our historical fold. Then came the 1970s. When Eugene O. Pickett became president of the UUA in 1979, he had some grave concerns about the direction and health of our movement. He said then, A deeper malaise runs in our confusion as to what word we have spread. The old watchwords of liberalism, freedom, reason, and tolerance, worthy though they may be, are simply not catching the imagination of the contemporary world. They describe a process for approaching the religious depths, but they testify to no intimate acquaintance with the depths themselves. If we are ever to speak of a new age, we supplement our seeking with some profound religious findings. This was one challenge of the original statements of purpose. Another was the growing voice of women and men opposed to the sexist language that was still conveyed within the statements and in other areas, such as the hymns and publications. Efforts were undertaken to correct the most blatant and sexist terminology, but other terms such as brotherhood and fellowship remained. The UU Women's Federation led the way, Natalie Gulbrandsen at the helm. Ms. Gulbrandsen later served as moderator of the UUA. She had been witness to the crafting of the original statement and knew exactly how contentious changing and reworking could become. Yet, alongside the growing determination of women and men who opposed the statement for reasons of sexism, and the pushings of a UUA president who felt the language failed to speak to a new generation, there was also the rising chorus of voices who pointed out that contemporary UUism drew on religious sources rather than just our Judeo-Christian heritage, and those who noted that we made no mention of our concern for the environment. In 1981, various women's groups within the movement, led by the UUWF, presented a non-sexist revision of the principles and purposes. Almost immediately, some folks were disturbed. Imagine that. Specifically, though, the revulsion caused unease among UU Christians who felt they had been written out of the UUA in this version. A group of ministers expressed their concerns in an open letter decrying the lack of reference to the Unitarian and Universalist Christian roots, because we do come from Christian roots. Denise Davidoff, who had succeeded Gulbrandsen as leader of the UUWF and later also became moderator of the UUA, made a controversial decision. She recommended that those be put to a special committee who would study the issue and report back to the UUA at the next year at General Assembly. This caused a rift within some of the women's groups, especially with those who wanted this new version adopted immediately, because sometimes waiting isn't good enough. In the end, however, as is usually the case in such matters, a longer, fuller process resulted. Imagine a longer process resulting. And there were committees involved. A new statement of purpose and principles which has stood with us for over 20 years. The process allowed congregations an opportunity to reflect and feedback. They took 3 more years before designing and affirming by a wide margin in 1984. It was brought back in 85 with a second vote, as is required, and it passed with only 1 dissenting vote, because we cannot all agree, even when it is for the betterment. Why should we bother telling the story of our origins? Well, for one thing, knowing our own history and the understanding of ourselves as a historical movement is important to our healthy, thriving spiritual tradition. If I'm a new UU and I don't know whether there are any other UUs in the world, whether or not this is a movement that we just made up last year, it's hard to converse with my neighbors about my faith tradition. And I'll miss learning from those who have gone before me and who have asked the hard questions and considered things deeply and well. I will lack affiliation with our UU heroes and mentors. So each piece of our history builds continuity for us. Beyond that, I think this particular bit of history points to one of the most fragile elements of our association and to one of the most persistent questions that face us. What do all UUs share? What binds us as a common association? What does it really mean to be a UU? After 20 years, one static statement of principles and purpose, we risk treating it casually. We risk it turning into a creed. And we have never been a creedal faith. We don't want the principles and purposes to become a proto-creed. We need to take our relationship and commitment to and understanding of our principles and purposes very seriously. We need to talk about what they mean, how they affect us individually. We should not forget that any common statement comes with tremendous blessings. We begin to agree on some basic concepts we develop within a community and some serious risks. We become rigid and stilted in our relationship with principles and purpose. Our principles are not a creed, but they are a covenant. That is an agreement that these are the principles that will guide our actions of our religious community. We voted on these. We are allowed to vote on them again. If I believe in the democratic process, I have to agree with the outcome, even when I don't like the way a vote has gone. It is my duty to try and offer a better suggestion in the future if it doesn't go my way. We will be offering the Articulating Your UU Faith again in the spring, and I am offering Pizzas and Principles each month in which we can take a deeper look at what our principles mean to us on an everyday basis because we forget what they mean. Sometimes we have a tendency to be Sunday-only UUs. But in the Articulating Your UU Faith course, we talk about the first and seventh principles that are statements of what we affirm about life, while the second through sixth principles are how we agree to act together. I'm going to read a section that was written by Barbara Wells, and I think it speaks to why we hold these principles as a way of helping us through our daily lives, and all of our principles are on the orders of service. Our UU principles challenge us to imagine and affirm a different way, a path of life that sees the hope in every child, the possibilities in every life. The world needs people and religious philosophies that don't separate the saved from the damned. The world needs congregations in which difference is celebrated. The world needs places where children, youth, and adults and elders can gather to learn and mentor each other. The world needs you, your congregation, your Unitarian Universalism. Many years ago, our religious forebears put our UU principles into action when they stood up against slavery, worked for the rights of women, built more humane institutions, and challenged those who would lead us into war. Today, the world requires us the courage to stand up once again against injustice and tyranny. When we live the principle that all people have worth and dignity, we must stand up for those who would deny the rights of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people. If we believe in our principle that all life is interconnected, we are challenged to confront corporations that are polluting our water. And when we seek to live the radical love that is at the heart of both of these principles, we can develop compassion, not only for those killed, but also for those doing the killing. These and other acts like them are not just good things to do, they are deeply spiritual. I believe the first and seventh principles of our Unitarian Universalist faith strongly support the other five, together offering us spiritual and practical guidelines for understanding the message of our religion. If we truly live by these principles, not only will we be better people, but our world will be a better place. I love what Ms. Wells has said about our principles, and I can agree with others that don't agree. We are a people without a creed, but a guiding set of principles. This leaves it to us that each of us have to hold ourselves to a standard so that we can sleep at night. There is no book that tells us right from wrong. We have to believe in the voice inside of us that lets us know what our right choices are. The principles can serve as aspiration and as goals that challenge us to be better people and a better community. They can move us away from a religion that we consume for our individual benefit towards a religion as something that asks a lot of us. We can invite people to become part of an important religious movement, not as spectators, but as participants. The topic of today's service is Chalica. Do we need another holiday? A lot of us? Yes? Do we need? I like the yes. Guess what? There are a lot of holidays this time of the year. I think that there were 28 last time I saw. Maybe there are more. But let's add one more and make it 29. Chalica gives us a way to celebrate the 7 principles that are on our order of service, that are in our hearts, the agreements that we have made with each other. We struggle in our house every year at the holidays. We are Unitarian Universalists first and foremost. And yet we set up a Christmas tree to celebrate where we came from. Both as pagans and as Christians, we celebrate. We enjoy celebrating. But I always feel like I wonder if I'm not telling my children that Unitarian Universalism is enough on its own. So we found Chalica. It's a holiday that was created in 2005 by Darlene Marshall and her fellow students at the Vancouver School of Theology in Vancouver, British Columbia. Gotta love the Canadians. I love Canadians. Darlene was a young 20-something student who had been raised Unitarian and was feeling adrift with a holiday of her own to celebrate. She and several of her fellow students began a discussion about what a UU holiday would look like. We can only imagine what the discussion could have sounded like between a bunch of college-aged Unitarian children. Chalica was not created as a UU version of other holidays, nor does it have a name combined with other holidays, although it does sound like it. Chalica was created as an invitation to spend a day with each of the principles. Chalica is like our own personal, deeply personal UU holiday. We get to decide how we celebrate. This holiday has not always been embraced. It has not always been embraced here. But I will continue to bring it back every year because I like it. And it's important to me to share with you something that is so important, and that is the value of the shared pulpit, isn't it? I have had many eyes rolled at me. Do we really need another holiday when there are so many out there? We need one in August. Why should we tell people that they have to participate in a holiday that was made up? But I don't think any of us can say with any level of certainty that all holidays at one time or another weren't made up. Every holiday is celebrated that was at one time new, but it was created for a purpose. Why shouldn't we create meaningful holidays or host holidays for times in our lives when we need them? I love the idea of an unbirthday. I love the idea of Friendsgiving. I love the idea that we can celebrate when on days that we maybe feel a little less than loved and need a reminder that those around you care. We know that the pagan holiday of Yule was celebrated to bring back the sun. They celebrate the turning of the wheel and acknowledge the changing of seasons. Taking time to be mindful of what's around us is a reason to celebrate. Taking the time to celebrate our principles is no different. It is easy to go through each day, week, or month without ever giving conscious thought to the covenant that was made and each of our congregations has agreed to uphold. Many times when put on the spot and asked, I couldn't tell you more than the first principle, which is to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Taking the time to investigate each principle individually and as a household will help us to better understand humans and be able to walk our talk as UUs. I chose this faith tradition because I truly believe that being a part of this movement will help my family live a more spiritually fulfilling life, while also giving us a community to lean on in times of joy and sorrow. Sometimes finding the time to do things we want is hard. We can celebrate Chalica whenever we want, and I hope you will carry it through every day. It doesn't need to just be the first week of December. Some celebrators of the holiday encourage finding ways to act out each of the principles, or to give gifts to your communities instead of each other. And Raina has shared with us some fantastic ways that we can share with our community. I'm not sure how each of you will share your Chalica observances, but I hope you'll tell me. I hope that it can start a conversation between us, because I want to know what it means to you to be part of this faith tradition. Knowing that each of you has a different idea is why I keep coming back. We don't want to get stuck in a rut. And some people feel that's what ritual is. But it can also bring us peace and clarity. So, as we move through this week, if you are on Facebook, I will put up what each of the 7 principles is, and I encourage you to share with me how you will choose to celebrate it. And if you are not on Facebook, I will add it to the e-update that will come out on Thursday. I hope that you will take the time to learn more about the principles, that you will contemplate the living document that they are, and dust it off and use it as a guide to live each day as the best you can.